Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. Let's go.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Indeed, I am the host without sleep. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Follow me on Getter and Truth at People's Pundit, on Twitter at People's_Pundit. And if you're watching along on Rumble, go ahead and give us a little rumble up, press on, subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. All right, on Twitter, on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. That'll let you know when we're going to go live. But YouTube is a backup. I'm seeing all you YouTubers right there. It's a backup. Go to Rumble. Go to Rumble. All right. It is the last Freewheeling Friday before Election Day. All right. So get your questions in. Laura, I'm going to do my best. Laura has been all week, which sucks. Out with the flu. All right. And let me tell you. It sucks. Let me just put it that way. All right. So we're going to go ahead and reveal our Arizona final. Well, it technically isn't the final because we'll be tracking it. And I may update it here and there. This is with leaners. All right. So we're trying to lean people more as things go. And then also there's something going on, which I can't really share right now, but at least it helps me to comment and see what's going on. Let me tell you what happened in Arizona before we bring up the results. All right. And we're going to talk about the Senate race, the governor's race, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General's race. And we've been polling propositions. All right. So we'll at least take a look at one of the propositions that has the highest interest, even though for CD Media, we've been polling them the entire, since the primaries. The one is Proposition 309 that I believe you're probably most interested in. There's a lot of other stuff that's very important. We'll create an office of the lieutenant governor, which does look like it's going to pass pretty significantly. Right? What happens with that happens, then you'll have to, if you live in Arizona, you will have to elect them like you elect a president. It will not run on a separate ticket. So let's say this year, Kari Lake would have nominated, like the president nominates a vice president, she would have nominated a lieutenant governor, ditto Katie Hobbs, and they would have run on a ticket together. Arizona, get ready for that because it looks like that proposition is going to pass. In-state tuition. Do you want to repeal parts of amendment or Proposition Initiative 300, I think it was, and allow those who are there or reside in Arizona illegally to get in-state tuition? Surprisingly, it's actually pretty close, although it does seem to have widened back out a little bit in favor of no, don't repeal it. We don't want people who reside in Arizona to receive the in-state tuition the same way residents do. All right. But the most important one for people who are really watching election reforms and election integrity is Proposition 309. And that simply asks the voters of Arizona whether or not they should do two things. One deals with mail-in voting and one deals with verification of you on election day. If you walk into a polling station on election day in Arizona, if you do not have your ID, you can bring two alternative forms of ID. All right. Or not even really. I think one is okay. It's like a utility bill. Look, the voters of Arizona want more strict rules. So this is going to, it looks to me, Proposition 309 is going to pass. That means if you go to vote, you must bring a government issue ID in person. If you vote by mail, as opposed to simple signature verification, which is long, you will receive a voter registration number, all right, specific to verification on your mail-in ballot, and you will have to submit that with your mail-in ballot, and it must match, all right? So it says a couple of things. I'll read it to you, all right? But let's first look. Well, before we bring up, and I know I'm not trying to drag you guys on here. It's just I want to give you an overall impression of what I'm seeing. I tweeted the other day, and so this should not surprise you. In all of our other polling in Arizona since before the primary, then in our September poll, Republicans were losing independents, and they were losing them pretty badly, all right? What was making them competitive in some races, and then it gave them a lead in the other, was basically that they had a turnout advantage. And I think that it's pretty safe to say we're seeing that again. Just a word on weights here, okay? A word on weights and a word on sampling, all right, representation. We know that the raw sample that was collected is 37% Republican and 32% Democrat. Yet, when asked for party ID, it was 38% Republican and only 28% Democrat. So a big difference between another 4-point difference, and I'm rounding because it was actually 27.5% before using rake weighting, and that will adjust other variables. We do not wait for party ID, we rake weight. Right? So when, for instance, we wait for gender, age, this is everything. Why is that doing that? Oh, because it's, all right, I got it. Gender, age, race and ethnicity, education, and region. And we did a very light education weight this time. All right. Why? Because if we do, it blows the Republican. If it's a heavy weight, it blows the Republican lead wide open. So let me put it like this. The shift from independents to Republican candidates, even if they're still trailing a little bit, it tightened. All right. One particular, actually, one we're going to look at, it actually leads with independents now, slightly. And of course, she's winning the overwhelming share of her party vote. So it's difficult to see any path for her opponent if that really does happen. And then the electorate looks the way we think it's going to look. Another interesting aspect to this is that the electorate looked more moderate in this poll than in the prior poll. Yet, Republicans are simply performing better with moderates. Why? Because of educated independents, suburban white women. And then they're, ironically, what's driving conservatives is, listen, because I know some people are going to, the Hispanic vote. If you are a conservative Hispanic voter, you are the most likely to be a likely voter. All right. If you are and wait until you see Hispanics. If you are a liberal Hispanic voter, you are the least likely Hispanic voter to say you're going to vote. All right. So it does play with the margin somewhat, as opposed to if every single registered voter voted. All right. But nevertheless, this is a state that's going to be close in some of these races. And we should look and talk about vote intention and vote method. And in fact, I'm going to do it with you live because at this point, folks, I'm so damn busy. I'm telling you right now, I am so busy that it is very difficult for me to get everything that I want to get and show you. So I may even do something live like I'm about to do right now. All right. And that is to basically give you an idea. Oops, sorry about that. Close the editor. I don't want you to see that. But I opened up the thing to basically give an example of the party. But it's not that different. Arizona is going to be close, and vote intention is a big part of this conversation. So we asked people in several questions about screens, how enthusiastic are you? Which we don't wait for enthusiasm. It's just, personally, we don't. It's interesting. Which one of the following applies to you? You already voted by absentee ballot and mailed it in early. You intend to, right? Because they're technically going to be emergency early voting stations over the weekend. And if you remember in 2018, Fontes, who is now running for Secretary of State against Mark Fincham, he just so happened to tell everybody on Sinema's team and all of the Democrats about the emergency voting stations being open over the weekend in blue areas. There were none open in red Maricopa. The red parts of Maricopa, he didn't bother with that. All right. And he didn't bother telling McSally's team that those stations would be open over the weekend. So Sinema was able to net a bunch of votes over the weekend. It was a scandal. I mean, it should have been a scandal. It was outrageous. It was electioneering. All right. That's electioneering. And nobody can be honest, intellectually honest with you and tell you that's not what he did. It is what he did. But this time, it does look like Republicans are doing a little bit better of a job, because we are seeing Republicans say, I want to know where my early vote is. I think I'm going to do that. And then there's this group that is this persistent or stubbornly persistent group of people. Charlie Kirk, I'm talking to you, bro. I am talking to you. You got your ballot in the mail. You intend to drop that ballot off on election day. All right. And there's an issue with that. The issue is that that ballot will not be counted for days. In fact, there are officials that said that it may take 2 weeks to count these ballots. And that is a big, big deal, because if the Senate race is as close as we think it's going to be, every bit of these votes Blake Masters is going to need. And it's going to be very stressful for him and his supporters if these people do what Charlie Kirk is doing, because there's a big chunk of them. And I just know from another project that I'm working on that in fact that it's consistent. All right, is what I'm trying to say. It is a consistent number. So, maybe it's 2 or 3 points off here and there, but in the pre-election polling versus another project, these people are absolutely going to do this. And to me, I would look, folks, I don't want to tell you what to do. I would hand my vote in. I would just mail it in, or I would drop it off in an emergency center, but I would not bring it on election day if that's what you intend to do. I absolutely would just get the ballot in. If you take your mail-in ballot because you're on the AB list and then you want to vote on election day, you may end up having to fill out an absentee ballot. A provisional ballot in Arizona, and that is not good, because your provisionals won't be counted for a long time either, and I don't trust provisional ballot systems. I don't. All right, I've seen too much in the state of Florida to trust that. So I personally will just either vote by mail, or I'd get off the absentee ballot list altogether, and I would vote on election day and make sure. Now, it does look like there's going to be a big election day vote in Arizona. We saw this during the primary. At first, we did not believe them. I will never disbelieve these people ever again, because they did come out, and they came out in absolutely massive numbers. However, it does leave, parties develop strategies. And this is something I think we should talk about. Parties develop strategies. I would like to read something from Sean Trendy, but later. All right, not now. And their party voters adapt to those strategies, and their behaviors change based on those strategies. All right. And right now, Republicans in certain states are in the I am not going to vote early mood, or I may not vote absentee ballot mood. That's where they're at. All right. And it makes for turbulent elections. All right. So as I wait for this thing to update, because I wanted to show you vote method, I may just refresh it and do it again. Yeah, let's just do it again. I want to get to the results here. So it is impacting Arizona the way that these national swings that we are seeing is impacting Arizona the way that we have seen other states get impacted. Okay. Oh, for the love of God, I may have to show you vote method last, because this is just ridiculous. No, it's doing it. It's just making me do one variable at a time. Governor. Okay. Secretary of State. Almost done. Attorney General, almost done. Proposition 309, almost done. All right, there it is. Now it's done. Let's save it and close it. All right, so big difference in our pre-primary polling. We had Blake Masters down by what? Almost 4. Then Blake Masters down by 1. Mark Victor on October 31st, Halloween night. We had heard from multiple people Mark Victor would in fact drop out and endorse Blake Masters. That is the first day we started interviews, and we were very, very curious to see whether or not his support fell. And then Blake Masters rose. This race is so close that this endorsement, Mark Victor's endorsement, may be pivotal. Now, some things can happen with the turnout that it may not be close. Like Arizona, if the voters of Arizona don't elect almost a Republican straight ticket, if not, it's they didn't get enough voters to the polls because Arizona wants to do that. It's just a matter of who's going to vote. And some of these races are so close. So let's take a look. You don't need to see me. All right. So vote. Well, you're going to see it right off the bat. So let's just go over it. Blake Masters has taken a 1.2% lead. And before we dig into any big details, I'm just going to show you where it's coming from. I told you, and you should remember. Oh my God, is that Laura? She's up, ladies and gentlemen. She's in the queue. Thank God. So you can see Maricopa. I told you that he was taking like a 1 to 3 point lead. And would that lead hold in Maricopa? Because he had taken it in October. In the poll we did for CD Media, very slight lead in Maricopa. Would he hold it? And in fact, he has held it. All right. So we have about 2.2%. When this vote comes in, much of the damage that the Democratic opponents are going to do is going to be in Maricopa, and then you're going to wait for that election day. It probably will pull in the Senate. It'll probably poll damn near even when election day vote is counted. If not, maybe Blake Masters a little shy in Maricopa. Maybe he's a little over in Maricopa if it goes the way we expect it to go. And then those people, the Charlie Kirk voters, I love you, Charlie, but I'm going to hammer you for this. The Charlie Kirk voters are going to put him slightly more in the lead. That's what we see happening. The independent vote shifted significantly. The support that Republicans are seeing among Hispanics and particularly suburban women is making them competitive in areas where they really shouldn't be competitive. In Pima County, Blake Masters is at 43%. He could win without getting 43%, but he's just about where he needs to be in Pima to be like, whew, I did pretty good. All right. And the early vote there is actually, it's very strange. And again, don't, be careful not to read the early vote tea leaves, but based on what I'm seeing, I believe it because it looks like votes were, in Democratic areas were submitted by people who they were not persuadable. It doesn't really matter. Because those voters were not persuadable anyway. Right. Really, at the end of the day, what we're seeing, it could be upwards of 20 to 25% on election day vote, which is massive in the state of Arizona. What I think is happening here is that if we were to continue to poll based on what we saw with the primary, that would shrink to 20% right before election day. That based on what we're seeing in the other project we're doing, and in the primary, and by the way, ditto the 2020 election, this is higher, but every day as we get closer to election day, and particularly there's early voting today, there'll be emergencies Saturday and Sunday, this will fall. And I already can tell by people that I know these are I can't get it. I wish I could, but I can't. It is closer to 20. It's like 22. So considering the sampling error in this survey is 3%, let's call it 23. Let's split the difference. That is what they told us would happen in the primary, and it did. It happened. So doubt this at your own risk. Doubt it at your own risk. You can see Pima, Democratic areas, voting at higher rates than other areas, the rest of state, which is more rural. that is going to be more election day heavy than everywhere else. And then you can see Maricopa County is somewhere in the middle, where the 57 returned it, plan to return it early. Look at this number of people, and this is slightly higher than the other project that we're working on. Look at this number of people who are going to hold their freaking ballots. It was roughly 10% in some of these races in the primary. And that is what took forever to call the race for Kerry Lake over Karen Taylor Robson. This vote is a Republican vote. It's overwhelmingly a Republican vote. In fact, you can see it by party right now. Okay, so you can see, drop it off on election day. It's much more Republican than Democrat. But then these independents right here, these independents are Republican-leaning independents. So coupled with the Republican vote and the independent vote, you're looking at a massive margin for Blake Masters and other Republican candidates down ballot. All right, so again, Masters holds a 48.7 to 47.2 lead. Let's look at this by age, and let's look by detail, because really screwy stuff going on here. But we saw this in Virginia, frankly, ladies and gentlemen. We saw this in Virginia, and the governor's race a little bit like this. Some of these, when you split up the 18 to 29-year-old category, you can see that it actually is rather close in some of these categories. All right, now they're going to break in there. The 25 to 29s, when they break, many of them that come out to vote, they'll break for Mark Kelly. As of right now, just to give you an idea, let's go to participation and sampling. 18 to 24 is about 7%. 25 to 29 is about 5%. All right. But the youth vote looks lower than it has been in the past. It was roughly 16% in the presidential election. So our roughly 13% projection, which, by the way, last midterm this looks like it will be a little bit less than last midterm on the Democratic side. So that means it will bump up Republican youth versus Democratic youth. I wouldn't be surprised if 18 to 29 was as low as 10 or 11 or 12. I wouldn't at all. This is a big deal for Blake Masters. Those 65-year-old pluses that swung at the end, that were undecided and that were holding. If you remember, Blake Masters was trailing among seniors in our last poll. He was doing very well in the 45 to 64 category. He was doing, the best with 50 to 64-year-olds. That continues to be the case. He also maintains strength with some of the younger workers in the 40 to 49 range. But what really helped Blake Masters, I cannot stress this enough, what really helped him is that seniors did not buy Mark Kelly's argument that Blake Masters was going to take away their Social Security. At the end of the day, Blake Masters kind of pivoted and he said, no, you know what the real damage is to your Social Security? Inflation. And the remainder of those seniors appear to have sided with Blake Masters on that argument. All right. So it will need to be, and I think it will. We actually don't have seniors as high as they have been in other years. We have them at like 27%. They can go as high as over 30 in a midterm. This is why I want to give you some idea of how this actually could be an extremely close election either way for Kelly or for Masters. Extremely close, although I think it's very clearly leaning Masters. All right, but it also could not be that close. The way that turnout goes, what if, ladies and gentlemen, it's not 36% conservative, but it's 42, like the last good year for Republicans? Well, then it changes everything. What if it's even 40 or 38? Changes everything. We have the electorate at only 36% conservative, 24% liberal, and 40% moderate. And actually, to be right on the dot, 23.9% liberal, which is higher than it was in 2020. It was only 22% liberal in 2020. What happened? Moderates swung against Republicans. They're not doing that this year. Moderates always go for Democrats, but the margin matters, and the margin is not that big. 40.4% moderate and 35.7% conservative. Men are about 48, 47.8 to females 52.2. Whites, they don't appear that they are the most likely to vote. White voters, they are the most likely to vote. And actually, as we do this with as we do this with, and let me isolate race. Let me isolate each race that we're talking about. All right. So you can see the Masters now has a decent lead with white voters, especially considering the sampling error. But what this really comes down to, and it's such a small African American, it's nothing. All right. I wouldn't even worry about this. What it comes down to is his support with Hispanics and Latinos, Asians, and other Republicans are just having a difficult time with these people. This vote, not these people, this group of people. I don't want to hear people. The bottom line is that Asians are more educated and they're much more difficult for Republicans to crack. Okay. And you can tell, look, I mean, their pattern of behavior, they're voting at a higher rate than anybody else early. All right. And there just doesn't look like there are going to be that many African-American or black voters in the electorate in Arizona. It's very, very small. All right. Which is why, of course, Mark Kelly's going to win them. So, but it's a very small group. So I don't read anything into that, how close the black vote is or even how well Republicans are doing. We're talking about 3%. It's a handful of responses. All right. And then Latinos should be about 16.8. And that's what's doing it. The strength. Masters is trailing with Hispanics, but he's not trailing much at all. Not much at all. And we're going to see something else is going on with the governor's race that is absolutely incredible. All right. What else should I highlight on here before we go ahead? Party detail. Let's go back to region. Okay. Because region will, what you got Maricopa at 55%? No, I don't. Maricopa is at almost 63%. In the raw, 62.8. It was only slightly adjusted to 62.4. I mean, so it is. I actually think Maricopa is probably going to be about 63% this time. Maybe I'm wrong, and Pima is just a little higher. Pima is usually about 15%. We have it over 16%. The rest of the state is usually around 20 to 22. We have it at 21.7. Even if rest of the state is a little bit less and Pima is a little bit more, it doesn't change the overall result that much at all. Because as you can see, look, it's not that any other area of Arizona isn't important. It is important. Every vote is important, but at least 60% of the vote will come from Maricopa. Technically, there's a path for Republicans if they don't win Maricopa, but it is exceedingly difficult. You would need Yavapai, for instance, and Navajo to just blow up and in favor of Republicans. And not just that. You would need a showing everywhere outside of Apache and maybe even do better in Pima than you should. But if you're doing better in Pima, it makes no sense that you're going to lose Maricopa. At least to me, I suppose anything is possible, but to me, it's just Maricopa, 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 Maricopa. There are some suburbs in Scottsdale where some Republicans, and I'm going to show you, are having more of a difficult time. These are areas too, especially the LDS area. These are areas where Karen Taylor Robson did better than Kerry Lake, for instance. Brnovich did better in some of these areas, but Blake Masters had a more fractured race in his primary. So, he may have carried an area, but he only carried it with like 30-something% of the vote. Whereas Kerry can't claim to have carried it. She lost it to Karen Taylor Robson, but it was basically a one-on-one situation. All right. So, like I said, sampling errors for subgroups are higher. These are much bigger and larger and more reliable than some of the small race groups, things like that. White and Hispanic is not small. All right. In Arizona, obviously, everything else is pretty much very marginal. So Maricopa, again, 49.5 is a big deal that Blake Masters is carrying it versus Mark Kelly, 47.3. Interestingly enough, in 2020, when we slightly overestimated Donald Trump, although I'll take it to my grave that we did. Anyway, although we slightly overestimated Donald Trump, he was not leading in Maricopa County. He was a hair lower in Maricopa County than Joe Biden. And that's actually what turned out to happen. What happened in our polling is that he was doing a little bit better in the rest of the state than any other real Republican that we've seen. Like, for instance, here, it's very close in the rest of the state between these two. It's a close race. And you'll see rest of state widens out with some of these other candidates, but this is an incredibly close race. The 43% in Pima is a godsend to him. It buffers in case these are off a little bit. I mean, you can see out of 1,051 people in this likely voter model, and which did benefit Republicans, unlikelies skewed Democrat. There are some Democratic voters who are depressed, which is why 5% of the Democratic sample refuses to identify as a Democrat. All right, so out of all of that, ladies and gentlemen, only 13 responses separated these two. That's how close this is. In Maricopa, about 14 separated them, and in Pima, it's about 22, but a little bit smaller, so it matters. Anyway. Interesting, right? That's a big deal. I don't know if I should do a little bit more here before we go. Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's take a look at like marriage. All right. And I haven't moved them in the category of where they belong yet because it is what it is. But just about every category is really close, except for single, never married, which Mark Kelly is carrying pretty overwhelmingly, 60-34. Widowed is going to Blake Masters, which is a very good indication that seniors moved in his favor. He was down. He was trailing with seniors. He was part of that phenomena that we were seeing. The new right does really well with some of these working groups, especially the body of working group, the biggest ones, but they are losing some seniors. We're seeing it in Pennsylvania, right? We went over this. Nevada. All right, but separated. Right? That's Mark Kelly. And I don't mean to be a schmuck here, but like the anti-family kind of groups. Not anti, but not, you know what I mean? Come on. Give me a break. I'm not a great talker in like political correctness. You know what I mean? If you're a homebody, if you're somebody who's, family heavy, you're more Republican. You're much more likely to be a Republican than you are to be a Democrat. I'm not trying to insult anybody here. It's just a matter of fact. It's actually a little bit surprising to me that Blake Masters is doing well among people who are divorced, but he represents a new generation. Mark Kelly doesn't. Mark Kelly represents an old generation. And maybe, like, for instance, these younger people versus these older people. Some of these seniors who look at Mark Kelly as like the old Bill Nelson phenomena. Oh, he's an astronaut. He's got to be a moderate. Look what happened to his wife. And they feel sorry for him. It's like not particularly endearing to these younger voters when they hear him invoke his wife every time he's in political trouble. There's different generations view these things very differently. All right. So, and then married, domestic partner, but we're going to shorten all that. Masters carrying people who are married, he's carrying people who are divorced, and he's carrying people who are widowed. Whereas Mark Kelly is carrying people who have separated, and he's carrying people who have never been married, single, never married. All right. Parental status. If you do not have kids, you're going for Mark Kelly, 60-37. If you do, but they're all over the age of 18, then you are 53-44 for Blake Masters. If you have one or more under 18, but not yet school aged, you're actually basically split. And the rest, that's a big undecided group right now. I actually think that group's going to break for Blake Masters. I do. If you have kids in school, which, by the way, even though there are a larger percentage of undecided parents who have kids who are under 18 but not yet in school, even though they're a smaller group than people who do have kids under 18 and are in school. So 2.5% of them versus 8% of the other group is almost parity because one is four times the size of the other. So it's actually there are a little bit more people undecided who have one or more school-aged under 18 than there are one or more not yet school-aged under 18. So even though that percentage is bigger for that group, it's not going to be. And there is still some who are undecided. Look, you can see it. I mean, 5, right? It's because this group is 4 times the size. Anyway, that if you have kids in school right now, you're going for Blake Masters 58-39. Right? This is like what some people will say, the revenge of the COVID mom. That is absolutely, without a doubt, I think, the case. I really do. Some little screwy stuff happened here with the military and the veterans. So current military people, big number for Libertarian Mark Victor. I think in the end, these people are going to go to Masters and he'll carry them because of just the other polling that we've done. But if you're a veteran, you're going from Blake Masters more than 2-1. If you are not, you are going only 2 points for 3 points for Mark Kelly. So it is a big vote, especially in a midterm for Arizona, for the state of Arizona. Nothing particularly surprising here with education. Mark Kelly does really, really, really well with advanced postgrad degrees. This is the story everywhere. If you have a 4-year degree or you're an undergrad, right, then you are going, you have swung back to Republicans, and Republicans may even carry them by a few points. Right now, Blake Masters actually, after trailing by 5 to 8 in the other polls, he now leads by a few points. Small, but he leads by a few points. Some college or an associate degree has become a really good group for Republicans, and now Blake Masters leads with that group. High school or less, of course, is his best group. Postgrads, even, they are shrinking. This is what happens when you overlap some of these demographics. Which generation best describes you? I also find to be very, very interesting. Look at how close not native to the U.S. went for Blake overwhelmingly. Second generation is one of Kelly's better groups. So if you're third generation or more Arizona, okay, then you are going for Blake Masters. If you're first generation, you get a little closer. And what about, did I put place of birth in here? I wanted to show you place of birth. Let me do that. Let me put place of birth in the crosstabs. Give me a second. It's important. Trust me. Republicans, this state would absolutely be probably a reliably Democratic state at this point if it wasn't for new people who are moving to your state. So the people who are moving to from California, all right, ladies and gentlemen, they are helping Republicans, not hurting them. We have seen this now repeatedly over and over and over. Let it do its thing. Right, let's just go to all until this is done. All right, that's updated. Let me do a regroup so I can you don't want to see every single state, believe me. So let's see some biggies here, all right? Some biggies are, of course, let's just stick in first and foremost, Arizona. That'll be 1, right? Let's do California as number 2, all right? Let's do New York as number 3. How about that? Or actually, we'll do Illinois because that one's a big one. Or typically is. I really haven't looked that much to see what the rest of them are. And I could, actually. Let me look to see which ones we're going to group. Illinois, New York, California is first. They tend to be the main biggies. Let me look here and see what's going on. Yeah, let me look at the combined unweighted because it really won't matter. I mean, weights don't change all that much at all. All right, so yeah, California is number 1. Illinois is actually number 2. New York is number 3. Pennsylvania is number 4. Outside the U.S. is the next one, is the runner-up. All others combined are about 40-something%. So what did I do? Arizona, California, let's do that. And then let's do Illinois next. Like I said, I was just doing it alphabetically, but it tells you, oh, wow, Rich, why is this? It's education, folks. It is the American dream for your kids to grow up, go to school, get an education you didn't get, have a better life, or hopefully a better life than you had. That's the American dream. And in some of these examples, what we're seeing is white voters particularly. I think that's without a doubt. There are obviously Republicans have problems, but Asian voters as well, especially educated Asian voters, depending on where they come from. But the bottom line is whites are a larger part of the electorate, so it impacts it more. And these are the 3 biggest groups. So let's do this. Regroup, place of birth, and then for the rest, we'll just say rest of states. Let's just say that. All right. Because some of these sampling errors are too small to really bring anything in it. All right. Let me take this off for 1 second while I do this. It'll take too long if I don't. Let me add place of birth to right before generation. Let's do that. Give me 1 second. Right before generation, we're going to add place of birth, and then we'll go back to it. It gives you a little bit of a hard time. But you'll see that people who are fleeing from these big blue states are not bringing their politics with them. They are 100%. They are leaving these areas because maybe cost of living, maybe they feel like they don't really have a vote anymore in some of these areas. I mean, it's well worth exploring. It really is. Okay. So I did place a bird detail, and I don't want to do that. Let's just take out that. And let's add place of birth alone. Save it and pop it back in. All right. And this has been how consistent now, right? Very consistent. We know that. Come on, editor. Update. A little bit at a time here. All right. And I actually think it's going to be bigger than this. I do. I really do think it's going to be a bigger margin for Blake Masters and other Republicans. But you'll see Kerry Lake does better. You know, if you came from Illinois, you're going for Blake Masters by 20 points. Mark Kelly does get New York. That's a little bit different this time. If you came from outside the U.S., Blake Masters. All the rest of the states combined, Blake Masters. He loses people who were born in the state of Arizona. California, Blake Masters. So what it suggests to me is that second-generation whites grow up, have a more privileged lifestyle than their parents had, go to some liberal school where they are basically taught through the public school system and higher education system to be like them. And somebody said, I think they feel like they're not represented in the comments. They don't feel right. So they leave the state because they feel like they really have no say in why it costs too much to live here. What's the point? I'm moving. And that's it. So I'm trying to read some of this, and Laura's got quite a bit in there. We'll come back to this, but let's take a look first at the governor's race. Oh, crap. Actually, we're going to have to take a real quick break before we even do that. Okay. So, yeah, we are. It's 12:45. Let's take a break first. When we come back, we'll look at Kerry Lake versus Katie Hobbs, and then we'll look at Secretary of State. All right. And also, I intend to get to Attorney General. All right. So I know time flies by. I just really wanted to go over that because it's worth talking about all of the mechanisms that were behind Blake Masters moving into a lead. Right? It is happening nationally, but it's still very difficult to unseat an incumbent. Remember, too, for some of the polls that are going to look different, I didn't overstate Mark Kelly's support by 4, 5, 6 points. All right? We knew McSally was going to lose, but it was a 3-point loss. That's what she lost by. What, 2.5, 2.8? We pretty much nailed the Senate race last time, which is a little weird. Don't you find it a little odd that we were like right on the money in the U.S. Senate? Right on the money. Right on the money. Do you find that a little strange? Anyway, let's take a word from our sponsors. Food shortages, they definitely could be coming even in the U.S. Drought, inflation, new policies from the government, pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important than ever. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling Ford Patriots survival food kits like Laura and I have done for our families today. She got the flu. That's the wrong way. It's not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years, super survival food. Thank you. These kits, they're hand packed right in a facility, a family-owned facility, right in the US of A. They're compact. You can keep them in a closet, out of the way of everybody until you need them. Sturdy, and you will need them. Sturdy, water resistant, light resistant. They stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts. This is why the 3-month kit must be the foundation of your planning, because they have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP for the People's Pundit to get your 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus 10 free gifts and free shipping. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale goes to donating to charity who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com/TPP to build your own stockpile today. And while you are on their awesome website, there it is. Laura's on the target right now. She's over the target. You can check out all the other great stuff that they have, which Laura and I have gone crazy on. And you can enter TPP10 at checkout. That's TPP for the People's Pundit, 10 for the number 10 to get 10% off your site-wide order today. All right. TPP 10. All right. Look, it was a good jobs report today. Decent, but still, nevertheless, the lowest number of jobs there's been in this economy since the lockdown forced over 10 million people out of it. So, there's definitely issues. Stock market's not loving it. I mean, it's all right, but they're not loving it. So the last time we saw the market, folks, in this kind of precarious position, it lost almost half of its value, basically. The U.S. dollar lost 46%, and the price of oil quadrupled. Yet while the U.S. economy collapsed and inflation ran through the roof like it's doing right now, the price of gold shot up 1,300%. Silver rocketed over 2,400%. So if history repeats itself, we absolutely could see this happen again. Can you afford to miss what could be the biggest gold and silver boom of our generation? That's why I want you to visit tpplikesgold.com. tpplikesgold.com. I love gold, actually. You'll not only get the chance to protect your retirement savings with gold and silver, you could get $10,000 or more in free silver just for doing it. It's a rare opportunity. Don't miss out on it. It's the best opportunity to protect your retirement savings. Visit tpplikesgold.com. That's tpplikesgold.com. And what do I always tell you guys? Diversification, diversification, diversification. All right, let's hit up the crosstabs and take a look at some of these other races, shall we? We shall. And again, I'm telling you, if the electorate is just ideologically a little bit more conservative, then we're talking about another ball game. We really are. All right. The bottom line is that what we saw this month in the final really week, 2 weeks here, is that independents have rushed to Republican candidates everywhere, and that has happened in Arizona. All right. It really hadn't happened in Arizona since 2016 when Trump won them. And then he kind of cannibalized a lot of independent voters. You can see that in the exit polls, and you can see it in the voter analysis. These are people who just turned into Republicans. A lot of Democrats went over to being independents later, and it kind of inflated how well Democrats were doing, even in our independent numbers now. Understand that there is about almost 5%. And when you click on the drop down and it says independent other, almost 5% of that group is a Democrat. They're a registered Democrat. Just keep that in mind. All right. Let's now hit up the governor election. And let's zoom. You're not going to want to deal with this crap. Let's zoom in. Zoom in. That's good enough, right? You can see that a little bit better? A little bit better. You can clearly see the Senate. So here's the governor. The margin hasn't changed all that much in the race for governor. What has changed is that Kari Lake has crept over 50%. Okay. Do we still have the governor's race in Arizona from the last? We do not. Okay. In the last poll, I was going to show you the graphic to it, but we don't have it handy. The last poll that we did, the governors in this governor's race, I may actually have it right on my folder right here. Secretary of State. There it is. Carrie Lake was below. She was at 48.5 to 44.8 to Hobbs. All right. So Hobbs has risen from 44.8 to about 2 points, right? 2.3 percentage points to 47.1, while Carrie Lake has risen. What did I just say, ladies and gentlemen? Carrie Lake has risen from 48.5 to 50.6, so 2.1. So even though Hobbs has increased her support here, consolidated some of her support, the remaining independents that decided, and we had gone over this a lot, the remaining independents that decided were what? Non-college educated, between the ages of 30 and 64. They were not particularly liberal at all, right? So they decided to go with Lake if this thing wants to update anytime this millennium. Okay, you don't want to? That's fine. That's fine. Let's move on. Here's party, Republicans, Democrats. I still think we're reaching just a little hair of too many metros, but it is possible there's about a 3-point separation between base consolidation. Democrats are, what's the word I'm looking for? In many of these states, with the exception of like Pennsylvania, where Trump takes still a nice chunk of self-identified Democrats, Democrats are not malleable. Is that the word I'm looking for? Malleable? They're not malleable at all. They are lockstep. I'm being nice here. You guys know what I'm saying, okay? Whereas Republicans are winning by turning out in greater numbers, outnumbering them, and winning independents. The national swing for independents being double digits clearly impacted some of these races in Arizona, where we actually now have Carrie Lake, after trailing among independents in the last poll, we now have her up actually among independents and those who say they are third party. If you look only at independents, people like pure independents, it's pretty close to that independent other, but the third party is breaking for Carrie Lake 50 to 31. All right. So, it's a biggie. It's a biggie. It's a serious disparity. I would love for this thing to actually choose another thing. Can we look at education? It doesn't want to do it. Of course it doesn't. Let's refresh it. Refresh, you bum. The database is so big, it's just doing this. Okay, so let's go to governor. Let's go to region with Carrie Lake and Katie Hobbs. So Carrie Lake has what looks like a typical Republican lead in Maricopa before Maricopa did its thing. Here's the shtick, though. If you're a subscriber to peoplespundit.locals.com, peoplespundit.locals.com, then you saw in the voter analysis statewide that Maricopa got more Republican again. Maricopa had, under Trump, gotten somewhat even, and it voted even in the presidential election. It actually voted slightly Democratic in 2018 for Senate and slightly Democratic in 2020 for Senate. But at the presidential level, it was basically even. Biden won it, but he won it by what? 0.2%. It was very, very close. Carrie Lake's doing 44% in Pima, which is incredible. And in the rest of the state has a bigger margin than some of the others. But Maricopa is, again, so key, so important. So we have her with a 5-point lead here in Maricopa. And that is, to me, kind of in line if she's winning independents by the margin she is, because you saw that in our voter analysis, Maricopa went from even 2 years ago to being R plus almost 3 again in the registrations. So, that would do, if you're looking at how she's doing by party, that makes sense. It makes sense to me. It does. But again, by vote method, she's actually not that far off Katie Hobbs in votes that have been cast early already. She's not as far as some of the other Republican candidates. She won't have as much ground to make up, or at least if our polling's right, she won't. But her election day margins are pretty, they are slightly bigger than some of the other Republicans, but they're in line. And then that drop off on election day, like for instance, if it shakes out the way we think it's going to shake out, you're already going to know because we're going to be followed, by the way, our election analysis on election night. All right. Because we're going to go over this like we did with you during the primary. It is the case that the late arriving mail-in ballots and the in-person drop-off mail-in ballots are going to break Republican. So the election day vote is probably, in our polling, would put Kari Lake in the lead slightly already. And then as they count those later arriving ballots, her lead will increase. They won't call it for her right away because they'll wait to see what those margins are doing, especially in Maricopa with those late arriving ballots. And by the way, let me just say this right now. The late arriving ballots should break pretty heavily Republican. If they're kind of like close, that's weird. They should break pretty heavily Republican. And you're going to see it when I publicly put out the link. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. All right. By gender, another interesting thing here. Kari Lake is absolutely killing it with women, but she's only killing it with men, but she's not doing terribly among women. All right, she's got an 18-point lead with men. It's just very, very interesting. Education is what I wanted to show you before. The advanced post-grad looks slightly like Blake Masters versus Mark Kelly, a little bit better. The 4-year degree, a little bit better. Some college associate, a lot better. Working class, a lot better. All right, what else we got here? Marital status, you're going to see generally the same thing shake out. Katie Hobbs is doing extremely well with people who have never been married. She's doing extremely well, Katie Hobbs, with people who are separated. But among those who are widowed, Kari Lake did consolidate the older Republican vote. She did that earlier. Oh, they're almost basically, they're decided. There's like no undecided. Among those groups, that's a good group for Kari Lake, as is, again, divorced, unless something screwy just happened here. But that's what we're seeing. And then with married voters. All right, so, same dynamic you see with the Senate, only a little bit more pronounced. Let's look up parental status. If you do not have any kids at all, you're going for Katie Hobbs by 18 points. If you have kids, but they're all over the age of 18, you're going for Kari Lake by 10 points. If you have kids, one are all under 18, but not yet school age, you remember that Kelly was actually doing pretty well with them. Same thing here with Hobbs. It's close, though. And it wouldn't be surprised if, one of the sampling error, again, for subgroups is higher. Yes, one or more children under the age of 18. Look at Kari Lake's margin. School-age children under the age of 18. That's COVID. And that's COVID among other things, but the added impact is from arguing against Fauciism. It is. There are parents who are pissed off about what they did to these kids, and they remember it. It's marginal, but it's there. Are people overwhelmingly voting on cost of living? Yes. And if you have kids who are school-aged, are you concerned about inflation? Yes. Is that helping that margin by the most? Without a doubt. But the reason why it's marginally better for Kari Lake and than some of these others, say for Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. It's a gubernatorial election, and she is specifically running against the Democrats' policies of lockdowns. She's saying, if I was governor, I would not have allowed them to do this to your kids. Because frankly, let's be honest, Ducey caved, and he caved like, what's the word I'm looking for? He folded like an omelet, as my son would say. He did. Man. Anyway, what else we got going on here? Yeah, okay, parental status we've been over. Same general thing you see with, religion's interesting with the governor's race. You're not going to do it for me? For real? For real? Come on, man, this is getting rather annoying. It's probably because those things haven't changed them yet. People wonder, well, what takes you so long? You see these stupid special characters that come through? When the data is thrown through JSON on the API, it comes through with these special characters in lieu of what that's supposed to be, which is a hyphen. Okay. Any day now. You're going to crap out? Come on. Any day now, friend. It's going to crap out. It is. It's just going to keep spinning until it's not spinning anymore. Give it a break before it hits a timeout. Literally, that's what it's called. Come on, you're holding up the show. Here we go. All right, so we can look at Blake Masters here first. If you have another religion, also, by the way, this was more secular. Interestingly enough, this was more secular. How secular? The weights, let me pull it up. I'm a little bit surprised. This should have been a little bit like, I mean, we don't wait for religion, but typically when we do implement, our normal weights, it does get slightly more religion, or tends to, but it's only 38.4% Protestant. It's 21% Catholic, 8% another religion, 0.8% Muslim, Jewish about 3%, which is high. And no religion is high, 28%. I mean, that's a lot for Arizona, but it is what it is. Again, you're not going to wait based on religion. Blake Masters is carrying Protestants. Huge. It's huge. 69-29. Wow. Kerry Lake, 71-28. Wow. If you have no religion, you're going from Mark Kelly, 72-24. If you have no religion, you're going for Katie Hobbs, 72, a little bit less though, of course, 225, a little bit over. So a little bit different there. Muslims overwhelmingly going for Mark Kelly, although very small sample size. Really can't read that much into it. They are not overwhelmed. They're going for Katie Hobbs, but they're going for Katie Hobbs by a slightly less percentage. But yeah, big. If you are, interestingly enough, one area where Blake is doing better than Kerry Lake is among Jewish voters, 59-35 versus Kerry Lake, 60-28. Catholic voters, Kerry Lake is doing better, but Blake Masters is holding his own. All right. But Kerry Lake's winning them 52-47. But this is what we're seeing here. This is why the Hispanic, this is all, I'm telling you, this is Hispanic. Blake Masters slightly trails with this. Oh, we didn't get there yet. Okay. I'm going to shut up. Another religion goes for Blake Masters, 55-35. That tells you there are, without a doubt, some LDS in parts of the Phoenix area. I believe it's Eastern Phoenix. Below the valley, I believe, south of the valley. But anyway, he's still winning them. He's just got some that are waiting and hanging in the winds, whereas opposed to at the governor, or, by the way, going for Victor, which I'm not sure they will anyway, because so many of Victor's votes were election day votes or late early votes after he withdrew. So, keep that in mind. All right, but that's who this is. Karen Taylor Robson won them in her primary against Kerry Lake, which she lost the primary, but she won those precincts with heavy LDS Republican voters. Kerry Lake seems to have consolidated them. Okay, 61%. Other Republicans have not. The biggest challenge is like Republican voters like that. Mark Fincham has the biggest challenge with them. All right. Let's see. Yeah, let's go to race and show you the governors, because I'm going to take a beating for this, but I'm telling you, Kerry Lake has a 2-point lead with Hispanics. That is not the case with any other Republican candidate. It's closer, but they're trailing. Kerry Lake is currently at 49 to Katie Hobbs's 47. If you doubt that seriously, know that Hispanics have swung pretty significantly in some of these Western states like Nevada and Arizona when the local conditions have called for it. Think somebody like Brian Sandoval. Okay. Kerry Lake has courted the Hispanic community, and Katie Hobbs has ignored them and bombed in that forum. Do you remember that? And if you don't think Blake Masters is doing as well as he is, well, remember Rodrigo, the comment, Rodrigo, Mark Kelly, I gotta live. My brother's been in space for so long it actually altered his DNA. He's like an orangutan. We call him Rodrigo. We had to release him into the woods. You don't remember that? I imagine they didn't like that very much. And by the way, that's one that Arizona Central, the Arizona Republic, they covered it. Typically, they hide stories, but they didn't hide that because Mark Kelly issued an apology. Carrie Lake actually shared a story from Daily Wire yesterday, which just blew my mind. That, are you serious that you really had the Daily Wire had to break that story 5 days before the election? Like, the Arizona Republic and Arizona Central, they don't have a job to do. But when your husband has complaints against him because he's trying to get a gender reassignment done for a 10-year-old boy, that should probably be news. But see, mediaites, they don't think about this issue the way regular voters do. Regular voters are repulsed by gender reassignment surgery. Repulsed by this whole, what is the word, guys? Like, what is this agenda? It's a woke agenda, but like, what would be specific to gender reassignment? What would be the better word for it? I don't really know. But I can't help but to wonder, if that was a story for like 2 weeks, how that might have impacted some of these people further. But anyway, just out of curiosity. Let's see. We already did this. Place of birth very much shakes out the same way with the governor's race. You can see she does a little bit better with native Arizonans against Katie Hobbs, but same thing. California's a little bit different with the governor's race, but Illinois is very much the same. 21 points here, actually. All right, outside the U.S., that's going Republican. That's that swing with Hispanics. But overall, when you take the biggest group, which is all the rest of the states combined, it's actually a Republican group, 52-47. So out of all the rest of those people who are not from Arizona, who moved to Arizona, they are going Republican and keeping Arizona competitive. Because I really do believe if there wasn't this state-to-state migration, specifically over the last 10 years, then Arizona would probably be a leans Democrat state. Let me see if I can get a good, like a Nevada. It would be like Nevada, where you can win it. It's just really hard. If you're a Republican, you need all the stars to align. And it's interesting that it looks like Republicans have bigger leads in that state. Just don't, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm pretty happy with our Laxalt +3. I see that he leads by a bigger margin with some of these other polls. I'm very, very hesitant to believe even if he puts Clark to a tie and wins Washoe, that's still, because it's going to be months. It's still 3 points. Now, if he wins every single county and so does Lombardo, it's a freaking blowout, and I understated Republican support. But right now, what we have is that he takes Washoe a little bit, and he fights the both of them. Pretty much fight Clark to a draw. A little bit less. Anything else here that we need to go? Let's take a look at Secretary of State. Let's go to region, though, first. Let's go to our go-to. This race, Fincham had a lead, and he has since basically not moved. And Adrian Fontes has risen. And that is, in large part, there's a lot of money going there. Let's go back to the old result. The old result was, I'm not knocking that off the side, right? He rose. He rose 2.2. He did. But Adrian Fontes rose from 42.5 to 47.2. So very clearly, the amount of money that's being pumped against Mark Fincham is having an impact. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's been a lot of money thrown at Mark Fincham, but he hasn't helped himself because he keeps saying things that reinforce the message that Adrian Fontes is running in the ads. Phenomenal. My things aren't working here, Laura. Panabla. She's not in, but she can't be. There you are. What up? What up?
That's because you're supposed to quit.
I think I'm ready.
You gotta tell everybody. She's just busting me. Get out of here, Laura. Enough's enough. How you like that? Can you hear them apples, Laura? Listen, I swear, I'll try again when the election's over. Plus, I never got lozenges.
Cry me a river that leads to your ocean.
I will. She feels terrible. I'm staying away from her and the baby because he's sick too. The other day, that was yesterday or two days ago, I opened the door and he was like laying on the floor in front of my door. And he looked up at me like, Daddy, I'm miserable. And I'm, oh, come here. I couldn't, like, you don't have a heart if you don't cave to that. And very, very briefly. And then I put him down. But the good news from Mark Fincham is that he is seeming to have stabilized. All right. So he was higher than that. He was at about 49%. And he fell. And Fontes was rising. But a lot of the falling happened in Pima, and a lot of falling happened in the rest of the state. There are parts of Maricopa, too, where he is struggling. There's a specific name for it. It's not to the top of my head right now. I don't want to go and look at this area but to remember it. But he is maintaining a very, 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 very tiny lead in Maricopa County, which is the good news for Republicans across the board. It seems like Maricopa wants to vote Republican. And, it's like it could be a blowout. It could. But it seems like, that there's some buffer there. Let's see if there's anything else that by education that will show exactly what I'm talking about. He does worse with post-grads. He's still not doing horribly with some of these educated voters. It's just that, a lot of this is in some college associate and working class. He's not doing as well as some of the other ones. So I actually think at the end of the day, these guys are going to break hard against him. So he's going to need this working class margin to offset that. I really do believe that. All right. Anything else that would jump out at me for Fincham? Parents, he's not winning the margin with school-age children, parents. But it's not that kind of a race, I guess, as the Secretary of State. But, he is doing well with some of these parents that still have kids 18 or older, but not super seniors. So Blake Masters had an issue with some of these voters as well that Fincham is being presented with now, but it really is by gender. Let's look by gender. Okay. That's going to do it. So see, he's winning men by 15 points. But men are in the 30s and against most of these Democratic opponents. Also, females a lot closer. Like Carrie Lake's not getting killed by 14 points among female voters. Those are educated suburban female voters. They don't, and so it's between that and it's between some of the older senior population that doesn't have a college degree. They're those voters that, for some of the new right, they're like, they have this mentality that things can't, we're never this bad in America and can't get this bad. It's not the America they know. So they have a hard time believing that, like, local workers, election officials, where I'm going with this. I don't have to explicitly state it myself, right? But there's these feelings that they don't want to believe it. So when somebody like Fincham makes these comments, it shies them off and they wonder, is he really capable of doing this job if this is what he thinks of the process? Right? And older voters aren't stupid. They're just, and they're not at all. They're just, some of them are a bit naive, and you got to handle them with different gloves. And he's just not doing it. He's not doing it. Do I think he can still win? Absolutely. I think Republicans could take the entire ticket. Why? Because you'll see the generic ballot later when I release it. I mean, it's big, guys. It's big. Their Republican candidates are doing incredible in some blue areas that I just never thought they would be able to do this in. I really didn't. All right, it's going to make me go back to all. It's going to do it again, isn't it? Here we go again. Ronald Reagan. Here you go. There you go again. All right, so let's look at Attorney General Abe Hamadeh versus Chris Mays. All right. You want my honest opinion? I think that it is somewhat possible that with the money that went after Fincham and then him making it kind of easy to do it, he may have hurt some down ballot Republicans. That's my personal opinion. Just because they're all running as a unity ticket, and Blake Masters and Kerry Lake are so high profile. The other ones aren't. We didn't poll any of the other races. There is another project, but that's totally, it's different. We didn't do that here. And I imagine, I strongly suspect that I would see that same dynamic down the line. All right. So anyway, Abe Hamadeh, though, still has a lead, 48.5 to 45.6 for Chris Mays. For reference, where are you, Attorney General, in the last poll? And you don't see me moving it around, right? Like, okay, I don't want to take it out of your view. So in the last poll, Hamadeh has gained 2 points. He was at 46.6, but Mays has gained from 41.9 to 45.6. Okay, it's pretty different. Now, Abe is still doing real well with men, and he's doing better than Fincham with women. All right, he's not doing as good as Kerry Lake and some of the others with men, but still, you can see the difference. Notice, by the way, the difference in these down ballot races with young voters and 30 to 44s versus Kerry Lake and Blake Masters. They are winning some of these votes. And I don't know what it is. Well, I guess I do know. Charlie Kirk's out there. I mean, they are really, Kerry Lake especially, is making a push for new, younger Republicans. And you can see it. It's working. I mean, it's working. Blake is young. He's, he looks like them. He does. And not that he's young. And I'm saying he looks like new generation, a breath of fresh air to them. And Kerry Lake is, right? She's very fashionable and, right? You know what I'm saying. And it just doesn't trickle down to other Republicans. And on the generic ballot lead is built by a bigger margin among 40 and above. It's not doing what you see in the governor's race and Senate race. Right? So I know everyone tends to think, well, there's just, straight party ticket voting. There's not. I'd venture to say maybe there'll be, from what we see here, roughly 3%. Something like that, ballpark. And you can see it in the age groups where it's coming from. All right. So by region here, this is what does give Abe Hamadeh. So unless he would lose every single undecided in Maricopa, I don't think that's going to happen. He has a pretty nice lead in Maricopa County, 49.2 to 44.7. And in Pima, he's just below 44, just like Blake, right? All these Republicans are doing better than Trump did in Pima County. Better in our polling and better in the actual result, right? Yeah, Laura, I'm trying to say, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I just didn't want to step in, and get myself in trouble. What she's saying is they look like the people they represent. That's it. And I also saw your other comment about when I was trying to describe Dems being in lockstep. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. It starts with a B. I mean, I don't know how you don't have any crossover. In the Marquette University poll, zero Democrats said they were voting for Ron Johnson. Zero. It's not human. It's like, congratulations. I don't know if you want to be congratulated on that or not, but I don't know. So that's where we got it. All right. So we're basically here. I don't want to spend too much time on demographics for the rest of them. You'll be able to see them. Let's just take a look at Proposition 309. All right. And how is it worded? It is worded as the following. Hold on. Because it's worded as it is on the ballot, as it's going to be. Oh, I got to go to build. Son of a gun. Sorry about that. But the good news is I could just select that page, so I don't have to do that. All right, so the Proposition 309 ballot initiative requires date of birth and voter identification number for mail-in ballots and eliminates two-document alternative to photo ID for in-person voting. Do you intend to vote yes to support or no to oppose Proposition 309? Or if you've already voted, how did you vote? And combined 58% say they will vote yes or have voted yes. 42.3% say they have voted or will vote no. All right. So to me, it looks like Proposition 309 is going to pass. And if you are an election integrity voter, then you should be pleased with that result. Okay. All right. So I want to leave a lot of time to get to your questions. So let's go through some of them. Is Kansas competitive? Recent Emerson poll show Laura leads by 2 points. All right, let's remove this. Great question to start out with. Oh, am I gonna? Did I take the second break already? Did I take the second break? I can't remember. Let's do this question first, then we'll take the second break. All right, hold on. Bear with me. I've been down this road before with Kansas. It matters quite a bit. And there have been 2 polls that show the Dem up, but yet you have noticed that I have not changed the projection. Okay, let's go to RCP. And I'll take the break after we answer this question. It'll be a quick break. All right. All right. So, and by the way, the Emerson poll, the way they lean is a little bit odd. They have Blake Masters up by 1 as far as I can see. And then they lean it and they both get to 48. I mean, I guess I could see that. It's just the momentum is clearly in Blake's favor. He was down by 2 in that last poll. He was down by 1 in our last poll. So we're just like 1 ahead, you know. That Maris poll is going to make a fool of itself again. There'll be, look, I don't want to comment too much on some of those repeat offenders. It's just after this election is over, there will be a reckoning. You think I went after them in 2020? I just don't see how they're going to be right. Everyone is wrong from time to time, and I'm going to be wrong eventually. I've been wrong here and there, just not a lot, but it's statistically certain that I'm eventually going to do something wrong. All right. It's just that this is a pro-Republican year. So I see what I see in the data, and I'm not doing anything different than I've always done. So, you know, basically, what's the likelihood that I'm wrong for the first time? My results tend to be in line with history versus the people who are all the time bucking history. I mean, they are very clearly, these liberal media outlets are very clearly asking their pollsters to keep Democrats in the hunt and to keep Democrats in the lead so they can have their, look, they all know each other, folks. All the strategists, all the politicians, all the journalists, all the editors, they all know each other. It's incestuous. They're lying. And if they're right, it's because a broken clock is right twice a day, not because they did a good job. I don't know how with a 36% conservative electorate, I get these results and they get that. They don't even wait for education. And by the way, by education, I was very, very generous to the Democrats. If you look at what education is in our poll, it is very educated. It's only 45% non-college degree. Look at the post-grad number. It's high. I went with the assumption that the working class is not going to turn out in Arizona as much as it did in 2020. It's just that Republicans are doing better with college voters. And they're doing, obviously, dominant with non-college voters. The likely voter model told us that's the way it is a little bit. I could be way off. And postgrads are only like 14%. Then something very different is going to happen. Maris doesn't even wait for education. If they were to find 30% postgrads in that electorate, they're going to leave it just like that. All right. So here's the Kansas governor, going back to the initial question. I just wanted to bring that up because let's take a look at why I don't believe it. Okay. Let's go back to Brownback versus Davis, Paul Davis, a Democrat who was largely favored to win. Amazingly, YouGov wasn't the way it was. It was not the way it is now in 2014. I don't have enough time this episode. But if the polling ends up being as wrong as I think it is going to be, we are going to spend a lot of time talking about it, so I'm kind of leaving it until then. Plus, I want my competitors not to see it. But I have stumbled upon something with the help of other pollsters across the spectrum that is significant. And when we get done with this election season, we're going to talk about it either way. But if there's a big miss, I suspect that, especially with panel polls like YouGov and Morning Consult, I suspect we're going to know exactly why that is. All right. Anyway, you can see they had Brownback as a incumbent governor in the 30s. Fox News on the eve of the election, even though it's dated back 3 polls, it was dropped the day before, Monday. Davis +6. Survey USA, Davis +3. Brownback won by 4. Let's go over to the Senate now. Fox News, Orman +1. Again, that YouGov poll also had Roberts just up by 1, but where is he? 38%. So the narrative is always, if an incumbent is doing that bad, they're going to lose. Fox News had Pat Roberts at only 43%. Survey USA, 42%. Even though NBC, the Marist poll, by the way, had him at 44, they had Orman at 45. That's the poll that just published I don't know, it was like Kelly +1 million and Hobbs +1 or 2. I mean, every single battleground poll that Marist released today is a Democrat lead. Every single one. It's incredible. Orman +1. What happened? Pat Roberts won it by 11. It is not at all unusual for Democrats to be overstated in Kansas, but that effect is exacerbated greatly when it is a pro-Republican year. So I simply do not believe, even with Emerson does a great job in some states. They do a very piss-poor job in others. You want the truth? The Hill Emerson has it. Kelly +3. They are the only other ones to contribute to it. Kelly +2 before. It's a 1 point thing. It's not really moving. 1 point is not really moving. You can see Schmidt. Where's Schmidt? He's at 43%, right? Sound familiar? It's a pro-Republican year. It is highly likely that they absolutely will miss it. All right. Oh, yeah. Just got a text. Friday is not only Freewheeling Friday, but it is baked potato soup day at this place. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, we'll come back. We'll take a look at the rest of your question. Let me blaze through this, folks. Okay, real quick. We'll do a 30-second break, and then we're going to blaze through a word from our sponsors. Okay, and we'll hit as many questions as you can because I'm only going to leave a half hour for them. All right, because I know it's the last Q&A before Election Day. Freewheeling Friday. That was long, right? And look, I just want to say thanks to the sponsors who decided to sponsor the show, all of you especially, because all of that is done based on viewership. So if you didn't make my show as popular as you did in the last 3 months, why would they want to? But I'm happy to partner with them. All people that we know, we trust their products. We know their products. We use their products. All right? We buy or use their products. We buy or use their services. All right? And again, thanks to them, but also thanks to you for making it possible. All right, look, Drought, inflation, new government policies. They're all pushing America's food supply to its breaking point. That's why you got to be prepared. Survival food is more important than ever. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. And by the way, these are brand new, revamped. They are fantastic. It's not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years. This is super survival food. And it's hand-packed right in a family-owned facility in the US of A. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water-resistant, they stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. You can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Go to 4patriots.com/TPP to get your 3-month survival kit like Laura and I have done for our family. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus 10 free gifts and free shipping. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities to support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com/TPP to build your own stockpile like Laura and I have done today. And while you're checking out their super awesome website and all their other great products, don't forget to use promo code TPP10. That's promo code TPP10 at checkout to get 10% off your site-wide order. All right. A lot of cool stuff. I see a lot of you got, several of you got the generator and sent me pictures of it. That's awesome. Awesome. But there's a lot of other cool stuff, including little solar packs to charge your phone when there's an outage, a whole bunch of cool stuff. TPP10, TPP10. All right. Back to it. You got to prepare. You got to prepare your finances. You got to prepare your family for food shortages. It's the same thing. The last time we saw an economy like this, the stock market tanked 50%. The US dollar, almost as much, lost 46% of its value. The price of oil quadrupled. And yet, while the US economy collapsed and inflation ran through the roof, the price of gold shot up 1,300%. Silver, 2,400%. So if history repeats itself, we could see this happen again. Can you afford to miss what could be the biggest gold and silver boom of our generation? That's why I want you to visit tpplikesgold.com, because when you do, you'll not only get the chance to protect your retirement savings with gold and silver, you could get $10,000 or more in free silver just for doing it. It's a rare opportunity. Don't miss out on the opportunity to protect your retirement savings. It's tpplikesgold.com, tpplikesgold.com. All right. If you don't have a gold and silver IRA, boy, diversification, diversification, diversification. Do I think it's possible for the Democratic Party to be destroyed after this election? 25th Amendment removes Joe. Harris is primaried by Newsom. Trump wins in a landslide, and Patriots break for the GOP. Alex. Yeah, that absolutely could happen. But I will tell you this. Well, that's not true. The Whigs were destroyed, weren't they? Look, parties, we're the American political history can be thought of like a pendulum. And sometimes those periods are longer than others, but almost inevitably they swing back and forth. The difference, I think, is that Democrats, in this case, who are getting ready to face the losing end, Democrats always tried to be, in years like this, Republican light. And they would not support the chemical castration of children. They would not support sticking substances in your body, forcing you to stick substances in your body. They would not 90% approve of Steve Bannon being arrested and thrown in prison. All right. They would not, by majority, support arresting parents who refuse to give their kids the COVID vaccine and putting them in camps. So something's a little bit different here. And I find it potentially poetic justice that after 40 years of engineering an immigration policy that they intended to replace the white voter, at the end of the day, it's those very voters who deal them a long-term destructive blow. I would not be surprised at all. All right. And I do think ultimately the future of the Republican Party, whether they fight it at all or not, and I mean they, the leadership, at the end of the day, there is no constituency. There's a very tiny constituency for these rhinos that run the party. they're going to lose their grip on power. It's going to happen. The question is whether or not they fight it like they did under Donald Trump, because Paul Ryan is too small of a man to admit that he has been beaten, number one, and that number two, like remember the post 2016 speech, he heard a voice speech, Paul Ryan, he heard a voice out there that nobody else heard. He was full of shit, or at least he didn't believe it. All right. He should have listened to himself, because, he thinks he's going to pick the party's nominee this time, or Kevin McCarthy's going to pick it. They have no intention of letting Donald Trump run again. And they intend to pit Trump's friends up against him. This is why Tuesday, for the future of the MAGA movement, Tuesday and the days following, while we count votes, we just went over the Senate race in Arizona. This is why this is so important. The outcome will matter, will have a tremendous impact on the future, not only of the Republican Party, but the country. Will Blake Masters win? Because then it's not just J.D. Vance in the Senate. How many allies does Donald Trump have in the Senate this time? How many allies does Donald Trump and MAGA have in the House this time? Is it Joe Kent, or is it Joe Kent and John Gibbs? Is it Joe Kent, John Gibbs, and a slew of others that Kevin McCarthy was kind of crossing his fingers and hoping they didn't get elected? That will matter. And then eventually, even if that continues, folks, Fox News will either come out in support of Democrats constantly, or they'll evolve. Right? I mean, it's not going to stay like this for the simple reason that they don't have the numbers. Nobody cares about them. Right? What's my assessment in North Carolina? It's Ted Budd. It's Ted Budd. He has I haven't checked lately, but it's when it didn't update at 10 because I was busy doing the poll, but it's Ted Budd by 5. I mean, he's going to win. And I don't mean to sow complacency. It's just Democrats are in deep trouble in North Carolina. Even Sandy in North Carolina won. Looks like she absolutely is about to win. So this +5 or more national environment sweeps across the country. Democrats end up super minorities in legislatures like North Carolina. The Supreme Court is going to go conservative. North Carolina Supreme Court has been a thorn in the side of Republicans in North Carolina for years. The state still is, leans Republican, and by ideology, it's more conservative than anything else. And yet, every time they go to the ballot box and vote on something like voter ID, or they try to ban a boy from being in a girl's locker room, the North Carolina Supreme Court comes in and steps on what the will of the voter. The same thing with, even redistricting maps. This map shouldn't look like this in North Carolina. This map was agreed upon by Governor Cooper, his defeated Democrats, and the Republicans in the legislature who defeated him. And I'm talking about defeated him in political maneuvering. They agreed to that map. Cooper rolled the dice on the budget. He wanted Medicaid expansion. He did not get it. And the Senate leader in his own party came to him and said, "We're beat. Now you screwed us on redistricting too." What right do those liberal judges have to come in there and strike down a map that the duly elected representatives of North Carolina agreed upon, along with their defeated governor? The rulings out of that court have been abominations. Twice, voter ID is inherently racist. One time, the legislature must have passed it with racism in their hearts. And then, an overwhelming majority of North Carolinian voters, including black voters, they also must have voted, with racism in their hearts. Yep. When you say offer a number on Hamadeh, you mean likelihood to win? It's close. It's closer than it was before, but I do think Abe Hamadeh is probably going to be all right. Because look, he's just closer, and that lead in Maricopa seemed to have held, even though he fell other places. The biggest one is Fincher. I mean, they've been coming at him like crazy, like I said. I know you don't like early voting projections, but in PA, is it looking better for Mastriano than expected? Absolutely need this election for 2024. Yeah, they're so short-minded, aren't they, Jay? Or who did that? PDCJ. Aren't they so short-minded or narrow-minded? They're pathetic. Listen, I always caution you not to read the early vote tea leaves. There are so many reasons why. And in fact, let's see if I can't do this. Where are you, buddy? There you are. All right. Every election season, I tell you not to read the early vote tea leaves. Every election season for probably 4 cycles straight, Sean Trendy writes an article about it, cautioning the same on Real Clear Politics. What does early voting tell us? Not much. I'm serious. Don't pay attention to early voting. Around this time, every cycle, analysts become starved for data to analyze. Of course, actual use for the data is just around the corner, dropping on Election Day 2022. Some analysts, not content to wait, turn to the closest thing we have for early voting. It happens every time. So once again, I will implore this site's readership to just wait until Tuesday, because the analyst of early voting is a mug's game in almost all circumstances. The basic rationale is straightforward. Consider one way of looking at the Democrats' vote share in an election. It's determined by 4 factors. The number of people who vote early multiplied by the percentage of those voters who voted for Democrats, plus the number of people who vote on Election Day, multiplied by the percentage of those who voted for Democrats. We currently have data for a large portion. 1, if we live in a state with party registration, we can get some sense of it. That still leaves us with 2 values that are almost entirely unknown. What does it mean if Democrats get 100% of the early vote in a state? We don't even know. If Republicans sweep Election Day vote and more voters vote on Election Day than vote early, they would still win. If not, they'd lose, which isn't terribly helpful. He goes in North Carolina specifically. All right, how things have changed because parties, their strategies change. So taking that with, it turns into wish casting. All right. And I actually think there's something a little bit more horribly sinister than that. You take somebody like Tiny Boner from Target Fart. People like him have now built an industry. All right. They're political strategists and partisans masquerading as analysts. And they then fuel headlines written by journalists who are largely ignorant. And all of the early voting stuff is always pro-Democrat. There are things you can infer from early voting, but it doesn't mean, like Sean Trendy is saying, you know the rest of it. It is obviously a better sign for Mastriano. The advantage in early voting in Pennsylvania alone right now is a little less than 3.5%. It was 4-1, a little over 4-1 in 2020, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be weak enough for Oz and Mastriano to get or to get over the finish line. We don't know how many people are going to vote on Election Day. Now we're polling and we're trying to estimate that, obviously, and obviously I think Oz is going to take it by 2.2%, or ballpark. That's what we had him up by. Mastriano's down 4.4, I believe it was, something like that, and it wasn't that big of a deal. There is a way that the polling in Pennsylvania can miss horribly, and Mastriano can win that race. That is absolutely possible. And right now, I got to tell you, people like Tiny Boner from Target Fart, they don't give you all the context. The truth is, absentee ballot voting is significantly down in areas of the state where you can count. Like Sean was saying, you don't know if they're actually going to vote Democratic, right? The truth is, in a place like Philadelphia, we can almost be pretty confident, at least, to assume that every Democratic ballot, that's returned in Philadelphia is probably 99% likely to be an actual Democratic vote. That is not the case in the rest of the state. And where most of these ballots, as far as turnout return rates go, where most of them have fallen short, is in those areas like Philadelphia, where most of them are being returned at a good clip for Democrats. They're in rural areas. Now, it could be that it just makes more sense for it to early vote because you're rural. It doesn't make that much sense to early vote in Philadelphia. That could be the case. But in 2020, it was the case that more people voted in Philadelphia, even though there were stations everywhere, which is another reason why the Democratic talking points about drop boxes is total bull. If anyone needs drop boxes, it's rural voters, right? Yet they don't have them at the same portion that urban voters do per square. They don't, right? So that's just true. We don't know. We don't know. But I will say this. The number of early votes that's in right now, if Republicans vote more like 18 or even 20, I mean, if you get, I'm looking at Georgia and some of the black votes way down, and, we just don't know. They could turn up on election day. Souls to the polls. Final one on Sunday. We don't know. So I have always said, don't read the tea leaves. And I'm glad Sean agrees, because have you ever seen an election where they didn't think it was good for Democrats? Should I pull up the 2016 article from Nate Cohen justifying his poll, using Tiny Boner from Target Fart to justify his poll that Hillary Clinton's going to win North Carolina by 7 points? He calls it wish casting. It absolutely is. But there is, I think he left out an important part of it, and that is there are scam artists in this field, a lot of them. And that's Tiny Boner from Target Fart. That's his job. His job is to offer early voting data, which is sourced through, I believe, a voter file set that is inferior to the one we use, the vendor we use. Not that they're bad people. They're not. And they're all right. But I have had so many people come to me and say, hey, can you give me an introduction? Because this data is just not right. Something's wrong with this data. And they have never said, oh, this is also wrong. No. They have always been much more satisfied with our vendor. Anyway, it's Tiny Boner's job to produce that product and then pretend he's an impartial, objective arbiter of what that information is saying, when in fact he really is just a Democratic surrogate. He's an operative. And he pumps that information out in the hopes that he can make headlines that are good headlines for Democrats. And in fact, that is what he does. Go back to Virginia. 1 second. There's one. October 5th. Target Fart launches early vote dashboard for the New Jersey and VA elections. We know that the best indication of someone's past voting habits is their past vote history. The Target Fart early tool gives campaign practitioners and other interested parties access to best-in-class data to analyze and contextualize the early vote data coming out of Virginia and New Jersey. That's Tiny Boner from Target Fart. Gives campaign practitioners and other interested parties, that's the media, access to best-in-class data to analyze and contextualize, okay? By the end of that month. What the VA early vote tells us about the electorate. He goes on and on and on and on about how great this electorate is for Democrats, okay? Of the 655,297 voters, 54.6% are modeled as likely Democratic voters compared to just 30% modeled as Republican voters in 2016. Oh, it's so much better than that. In 2017, only 48.6 were modeled as Democrat. 42 were modeled as Republican. You see what he's saying there? In an election, Ralph Northam won easily. The electorate in the Target Fart model looks so much more Republican. That means Republicans are about to get killed in Virginia. Don't believe that big data poll. Don't believe those right-wing pollsters like Trafalgar and Insider Advantage. We were the only ones who had them up. Target Fart and the rest of them were trying to give the media a narrative that McAuliffe was going to win anyway. Yeah, maybe it'll be closer, but McCall's going to win because it's just this early vote is too much to overcome. By the way, go look at the exit polls. According to the exit polls, Youngkin didn't lose the early vote by all that much. And in fact, we had real results come in. If you were doing the you were watching the special that we did that night, we got real-time results from Decision Desk, and you absolutely could see. We don't need exit polls anymore. Chesterfield's early vote was not that big for McAuliffe. And Youngkin, when the election day came in, overtook him. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's his job. His job is to pump out this crap. Get this one. Moreover, more good news for Democrats. The overall share of white voters is down by 4%. African Americans, that has jumped 4% since 2017. Interestingly, get this, the decline in white turnout is largely from non-college educated whites, while college whites have maintained their vote share. Folks, non-college educated whites came out in droves and voted for Glenn Youngkin at a greater margin than they did for Donald Trump. Don't read the early vote tea leaves. Don't read the early vote tea leaves. Don't read the early vote tea leaves. All right? It's a scam. It's a scam. And if it's not an outright scam, it falls prey, like Sean Trendy said, to wish casting. All right? I would love to have an honest, somewhat impartial, if we can, discussion about early vote, but it never is, and it always runs away, and it gets into the realm of it is definitely wish casting, but that it doesn't start there. It starts with a sinister attempt to influence perception before the election. Tiny Boner from Target Fart is a Democratic hack operative. He is a surrogate. He is not an objective analyst of early voting. Go back and look at Target Fart's press releases in 2016. No chance Hillary Clinton can win. Can lose. It was outrageous. All right, Rich, Trafalgar has Colorado Senate, Bennett +2 as of November 1st. I was shocked by that. I wrote this race off long ago, and I still maintain that Bennett has the edge, even if it ends up closer. I'm just skeptical. And that's though because of what he said, what he did. We picked a fight with Donald Trump, and that's awfully stupid. Youngkin, on the flip side, didn't do it. It is possible, though, however, and I do believe it probably is going to be closer than people think because of the 1-2 punch. The straight left. That's the Hispanic shift in vote preference. And then the overhand right, bang, is white suburban women. And in a place like Colorado, that could be dangerous for an incumbent who thinks they're up. Now, he may be buoyed by it being disproportionately young. Because Colorado's a little bit younger. So is New Mexico. Not a little bit. It's a younger battleground state. That's why Bernie wins it in the primary. When they tried everything to stop him. It worked in most states where there's an older electorate during primaries. But in Colorado, it's very young. And they were like, you voting for Bernie Sanders. Do I think any of the pro-abortion referenda will fail? It may. There does seem to be a bit of a backlash, but I haven't pulled it myself, so I really, unless I pull something myself, I can't stand, doing a hypothetical. I just, Michigan's probably going to help Democrats a little bit. But then again, Robert and I did this, and we profiled, by the way, again, when we infer and Tiny Boner infers, it's a different quality of inference. It is. We gave you the Virginia model before the election. The votes were counted the day before. Who gave you a more accurate picture of the partisan modeling of partisan affiliation, of partisan votes? R+1. Remember? R+1 overall. All right. What trajectory are ancestral Democrats leaning, more left, more right, relative to recent elections and the races where Trump is involved versus the races where Trump isn't involved? It really, I mean, that would be a 30-minute question. And that's actually a really good idea for a show. But I will say this, if you take a state like Nevada, some of the older Hispanics, we saw this in Arizona too. Young Hispanics, 18 to 29, more specifically 25 to 29. But along with some older Hispanics that were like 65 plus, they seem to be the most Democratic voting group of Hispanics. It's that prime working age, 30 to 64 age group of Hispanics that was actually pretty damn pro-Republican. Now, anyway, that was not always the case. It depends in that state. Meanwhile, in Florida, it's actually totally different. Some younger people, which are now moving Republican too, but some younger, even Cubans, would be more liberal, while the older Cubans were much more Republican. And in an area where there's Trump is only a net positive for Hispanic voters. There is nowhere where Trump is not a net positive for Hispanic voters. I'm sorry. He runs ahead of everybody with them. Early signs to know the tsunami, if whether or not there's a red tsunami coming on Tuesday. We're going to actually go over a lot of that. I'll give you several of them. But some of these seats, I got a few of them. Hold on one second. Let's go give me 1 second. I actually have a few of them up. So there's now districts that Democrats have moved money to because they think they're in trouble. Now the vote will be counted a little bit. You'll have to wait for early vote to come in, and then election day, then more early, trickle for days. But New York 17 and New York 18 should not really be particularly close. All right, Nevada 1 and Nevada 3 are both in deep trouble. But Iowa 3 leans Republican. How much do they win Iowa 3 by? Because they do all right counting their votes. But ultimately, we're going to get some results from New Hampshire pretty quick. All right. And we'll see how Boldak's doing there in places like Merrimack and Manchester. All right. So that there's also votes that will come in from Kentucky and Indiana. They always come in first. Pike County, Indiana. All right. Look at the margin in Pike County, Indiana. And then something like Kentucky 5 is a really good indicator. Republicans, it's not horribly different. It's it's still a good test case. All right, but basically in 2018, it was like a nail biter. 3 points. Like, oh my God, Republicans could lose Kentucky 5. That told them right off the bat this was going to be a very bad night. All right, and you're going to get some numbers right away in Florida as well. How is Luna doing? This is a race where it was polled and it was like Luna +1. I mean, she outperforming those polls, which I think she will. Independents are swinging heavy to DeSantis and Rubio in Florida now. There's no reason to believe they wouldn't do that at the generic ballot level and congressional level as well. She's a fantastic candidate. So that district is about even by party, but registration still little hair Democrat. But if you call them and they'll identify as something else, it's more Republican. All right. Well, then the registration, it's still slightly more Democrat, but it wouldn't be enough if independents break for Republicans the way it does appear they're doing, and Luna would win. So that's some good ones to keep an eye on. And Iowa 3, the margin in Iowa 3 is going to tell us a lot. All right. Because that will be a great example of how much that white vote moved. Okay. It's all a good question. And we're going to deal with this in more detail. North Carolina will go pretty quick as well. How is Sandy Smith doing in North Carolina 1? Is that really close? If that's really close, it's toss up now. For the longest time, that was basically a likely Democrat. When she won the primary, Cook and all of them moved that to likely Democrat because she's an election denier and she can't raise money. And I mean, you know the shtick. It was quickly moved to leans, and now RCP rightfully has it as a toss-up like we did. So keep an eye on that one too. It's good. Really, that was a good question, and we're going to get more into it. All right. Somebody had asked me about So what do you expect the turnout to be in PA? Trafalgar had a pullout today that showed Oz up and Doug within 5. It had a D+4 electorate. Is that realistic? I honestly don't think that. He has a different way of identifying party. We are self-ID'd like an exit pollster, but then we know what the registration is. Our polling was, the registration was D+6, but the party ID was R+1. So, you know, that's why our independent margin is closer than some of the other polls. They're simply weighting that. We're not. You know, we're letting people tell us what they are. We did talk about New Hampshire. Well, things are moving in Masters' direction, so I don't know if you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I wouldn't put the poll is Masters plus 1.2 or something. That's what I trust my polling numbers. I do. And that's a 5-point shift since the first time we polled that race. No, I don't think every Republican can get above. Oh, you mean in the Senate? I do think Walker could take 50 and above. I do. I think it is possible that every Republican Senate candidate that we're talking about anyway gets above 50%. I do. That can happen in a wave for sure. Because I think Laxalt will be all right doing that. It'll be close, but I think he'll be all right doing that. There's five parties on the ballot in Pennsylvania, but yet Oz was still bam right there. I know that Trafalgar had him down a little bit more, but we leaned though. I don't know if Trafalgar leaned. I don't know. We are at this point we are leaning, and that's the thing with Masters. They were like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm undecided." No, you got to pick. And honestly, it didn't. That's why I'm actually a little bit surprised by some of the other findings that, you know, Masters was ahead on the initial ballot, but then, you know, Kelly caught up. That's not what we had at all. They were both basically at around 47%, give or take. And then with the leans, Mark Kelly gets to 48, Blake Masters got to 49. All right, or 48.7 to 47.5. I'm actually really, really confident in my Arizona numbers. And you'll see them soon. You'll go through them and you'll see why. All right. Can you ask Rich why he thinks Erickson's tweet on Oz's numbers being bad? I don't know. I really don't care what Eric Erickson has to say. I really don't. I mean, I don't know. What is he looking at the Marist poll? I mean, he's looking at the Fox poll because he wants to get back on Fox. I mean, I don't know. But the Suffolk poll had Fetterman up by 7 just 20 days ago. Now they're up by 2 with a big warning headline that the debate hurt him and all of these Democrats refuse to vote for Fetterman now because they cannot vote for someone who can't speak. I think it's, again, so much more likely that all of these repeat offenders are wrong in a pro-Republican year. Again, in a pro-Republican year. Then it is likely that the rest of us who have been doing a good job are wrong in a pro-Republican year. We were more right in a pro-Democratic year. Twice. So they overblew the Democrat advantage in all of these races in 2018. You don't remember? Fox News, guys. Fox News. You care about that Kelly +1 in Arizona if you want Masters to win? Fox News was horrible at the Senate level. McCaskill +3. Tennessee tied. Mike Braun's losing to Joe Donnelly by 7 points. Bill Nelson by 5. I mean, guys, come on. Come on. At some point, you take civic surveys, and they ask my opinion of my state politicians in Nebraska, also about Pelosi, McConnell, Schumer, and Melania Trump. Why do they always ask about Melania? Yeah, that's stupid. Gaylord Fokker. I don't know where you got that from, Ben Stiller. That's stupid. I mean, to continuously and repeatedly ask about a former first lady, I don't know. An annual survey about first ladies, favorabilities, fine. Repeatedly asked about Melania Trump. I don't know that there's much value about that. And by the way, we've polled Melania Trump before. She was actually kind of popular. Certainly more popular than her husband. She wasn't as polarizing. She had better, positives. Yeah, that's crazy. I don't know what Eric Erickson's talking about, but he may be looking at Tiny Boner from Target Fart, who has been all over Twitter for days talking about how in Pennsylvania there's this enormous, insurmountable lead for Democrats. That is not true. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And as Sean Trendy pointed out, the truth is nobody knows. How about we just wait for a little something called Election Day? And he's using his Target Fart data to unskew polls or smear them. It's ridiculous. Election day weather. Bad weather on election day in key battleground states have a material adverse impact on Republicans. I think there's pretty good stuff, or at least there has been in the past, to say that there has been weather impacts to election day voting, which is why I'm telling you, Republicans, until they outlaw mail-in voting, mass mail-in voting, they should just get on board with it and, get these numbers in. And do, like in Florida, that was our strategy. We would mail in vote, and then there was get all of the 4 out of 4s, 3 out of 3, 3 out of 4s, all the older voters, get all those ballots in, and then try to turn out new voters on election day and voters who didn't cast a ballot for some reason. But it worked. It was a brilliant strategy. Look what we did in that state over and over and over again. Alex Sink, defeated. Super popular father. Bill Nelson, defeated. I mean, over and over and over again. I mean, keep going. And now look at them. What's the lead? Almost 300,000 in Florida right now. Now that's a problem for Democrats, and you can already tell because they don't have the registration pool that they used to have. So, but again, as Sean Trendy said, you don't know who they're voting for. Not really. I mean, you could try to use pre-election day polling, but you don't know. You really don't know. Who are the Trump-Shapiro voters? That's a great question, Salim. And I don't know if that's going to continue forever, but that's a really good, great question. Because I know some people say that and they can't imagine it for the life of them. But the truth is, it's real. I'm not saying it's going to stay like that because Pennsylvania is going to vote a lot on Election Day. Let's take a look at the crosstabs. Let's take a look by age specifically. All right. For governor, Mastriano is actually down among people who are 65 plus. He's up by 5 who are 50 and 64. Let's just take a look just only at that age group right now. Okay. And let's go down to Trump. Trump, much tighter margin with seniors, much bigger margin with 50 to 64. Jack Poso and I have talked about this a lot. He's from Pennsylvania, and he's from an area where demographically you would think he is a Democrat, hands down, the area he comes from. These are people who are older. They're conservative. They are, like, by lifestyle, they're conservative. But they don't like some people on the new right. They had an issue with Trump. That's why you see this senior margin with Trump. His lead comes from working voters. Look at this. 30 to 39, Trump. 40 to 49, Trump. 50 to 64, Trump. All right, if you take it by regular age group. But look at the margins, though. So look at the margins. They're just big. I mean, they're much bigger. 53 to 39. 45 to 64. Now look at Doug. 49 to 45. Big difference. Look at the 30 to 44. It's Shapiro. 50 to 45. But with Trump, it's Trump 46 to 40. All right. So you have some working voters and some, well, I don't even know if I'd say necessarily they're working voter 30 to 44, but I don't know if that's the best adjective to use to describe them, but they're Trumpers, people who will vote for Trump that just, you also have to understand what the real key here is. Hold on. By region. Let's go down and look at Trump by region. Look at Allegheny. He's at 34 with that many undecided and with the margin of error. it's conceivable Trump could be at like 42 in Allegheny, all right, when the votes are counted. And in Philadelphia, he's at 22.4. Now let's just take the liberal areas and let's look at Doug. 32.2%, he's trailing. 20%, he's trailing. Few points in each of the major big media markets. Shapiro, 71 in Philadelphia, 63 in Allegheny, versus Biden, who's only at 58, and Biden's at 73 in Philadelphia. He's well known, that's why. But again, that's the impact of not having money for media markets, all right? But southeastern Pennsylvania, 60.2 to 33.1. Oz does so much better there, for instance. Look at Oz's mark. He's trailing, of course, but he's only trailing by 15 points, 16 points. He's not trailing by 30 points, almost 27 points. It's half the amount. It's half the deficit. You know how many votes are there? That's half the deficit for Oz. Look at the Northeast, 40. It's a 10-point margin for Donald Trump in the Northeast. It's only a 3-point margin for Mastriano, or actually 2.5. All right, so it's a big deal. Trump leads in Dutch. Maybe there's a response bias that hurt Mastriano because he will carry Dutch. He will. This is effed up. As sampling errors for some groups are higher. It's a great question, though. Really is a great question, but they exist. Part of it is the impact of that mentality we were talking about, but also big part is, Salim, is just simply that these voters cannot see Doug Mastriano's message. He's not a well-known state candidate. Shapiro is. And he has not had the money to push what he doesn't have the money to push what he needs to. Does Sinema survive if she doesn't switch parties? Lamont, great question. I don't know. Democrats are already talking about primarying her. You never hear about this because they don't want you to know how radical the left is. She's going to be primary. And she damn well could be defeated. I don't know. That's a great, great question. Minnesota governor's race, the detail, it looks like he's trailing a little bit some of the other statewide candidates. Jensen is underperforming them. I don't know if that's a polling error or what. Trafalgar does not have that difference. But I did talk about, but I didn't poll it myself. Right now, we have Minnesota leaning Democrat as a governor's race. That is not one of the ones that could flip. There's actually a better chance Oregon and New Mexico flip than there is Jensen taking Minnesota. Technically, there is. Even I know that sounds crazy, but that's the impact of polling for you. Rich, have you talked about the 3 VA House races? 2, 7, and 10. 2, super competitive. 7, gone. Spanberger is going to be defeated. And 10, that's the one I told you to watch the margin. I mean, if Cow, if he wins, holy moly. And I got to tell you, polling all around has that race really close. Really close. Final thoughts on Washington and Colorado Senate. Can Tulsi endorse and Darren Bailey impact that race? That's Tristan, I think Washington, you're going to have to wait days to see how close that race really is. Patty Murray will have a lead because they're going to count true mail-in votes first. The election day mail-in vote, I know it sounds crazy. It's like an oxymoron. That will absolutely come in last, and we'll wait like Joe Kent's primary. Remember that? That's what you're going to be waiting on. Same thing with Washington 3, by the way. Period. You're going to have to wait for Joe Kent to take the lead in Washington 3, and it's going to look ugly. In Colorado, the Senate, and we went over that. Can Tulsi endorsing Darren Bailey impact that race? Yes. Yes. And that's one of my sleepers for the governor. It is absolutely possible. We have seen Darren Bailey overperform in some of these suburbs that people say he's not a good fit for. He has overperformed in them already. Not once, but twice. All right, so I actually tend to believe his own pollster. Now, I don't want to give that away, but he shows a pretty close race. With, by the way, before these independents started swinging hard Republican, Darren Bailey was already winning independents in Illinois by a double-digit 15 to 19-point margin. So if it's more now, I think Pritzker's odds of surviving are being overstated. I really do. Now, I think he's favored, but I think he's overstated. All right, 216. I'm going to have to boogie here. Keep an eye out. Locals, crosstabs are coming. Everyone, the crosstabs are coming, but locals, you're going to get them first. And we will talk more about, we're just going to have to roll through the weekend and do a couple things through the weekend, especially locals. I'm talking to you. Nevada, Wisconsin, all right? We got to talk about them. I prioritized Arizona because it showed a change. But there is changes in the other ones too. It's just they benefited Republicans. So it is what it is there. All right. So what else? Yeah, just keep an eye out for that. Overall Senate, the most likely outcome right now, the most likely is that Republicans take control of the U.S. Senate with at least, and when I say at least, I don't mean that's with at least 52 seats. The high end is absolutely 55, with 53, 54 being very doable if it ends up being a wave. All right. Absolutely very doable. Don't forget election night that we are going to have our own coverage. We're going to have, there'll be not a whole lot of money, but it will be, I wish I could show you a preview of these graphics. Our real-time election graphics are awesome this year. All right. They'll be on People's Pundit Daily and everyone can check them out, but we're going to have a pay-per-view stream. It's not going to be much, talking about peanuts compared to how much money we dumped into this stuff. You'll love it. I will be going on like the Daily Wire and War Room, and Barnes is going to come join us so he can kind of like handle things while we jump back and forth and while I crunch data. But I'm going to go on, maybe I'll do a few minutes with like Bannon or the Daily Wire, and you guys will actually be able to see that interaction. And then we'll get right back to it and we'll analyze stuff that's coming out. It's going to be really cool. Very free-flowing, not particularly formal, although I want Laura to get with the Daily Wire and with Real America's Voice. I want to get a specific time hatched out for when we're going to be going on and sharing streams. But we'll be sharing our own screen most of the time with the election graphics on it. Everything. There'll be maps for Secretary of State races across the country. I'm telling you, it's awesome. Let me just give you a little bit of an idea. Secretary of State map on the dashboard, Attorney General map on the dashboard, a governor map on the dashboard, U.S. House map on the dashboard, U.S. Senate map on the dashboard. You click on the Senate or House, and you can look at some things right on the dashboard, but there'll be specific pages for each of these. And then with the House and the Senate and the governors, there'll be control bars. Oh, man, indicating a flip, where there'll be candy cane stripes to indicate flips. How many have been flipped? How many? Oh, it's going to be awesome. We had cool graphics in 2020, but this will be we come a long way. All right. And it'll be super cool. So I can't wait for that. All right. So with that in mind, I got to go on Gruber in about 5 minutes. So I love you guys and we'll see you soon. Don't forget, watch out for Nevada, Wisconsin. All right. All the best. Deuces. Share the videos. Love the videos. Subscribe. You know the whole drill. All right. And have a safe weekend. Know your voting times. Go vote, friends. Go vote. All right. We love you. Peace out.
How much you wanna open that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette.